I was talking with Brenda Ovando. She's one of the Reboot Insiders Club subscribers, and she was asking me some questions over Facebook Instant Messenger about how I got to the point that I'm at currently as a body worker, educator. And I thought it was an interesting topic of discussion. Knives recently did an interview video with me to ask, some basic questions, but I think it's really difficult to put into perspective the long arc of somebody's life and how did they become the person that they are. One of the things that Brenda talked about was the social media production and the focus that I have on social media. She was asking, how did that happen for me? She watched a video with me talking about the Lauderstein Conway Massage School here in Austin, where I go in and talk to students about how I got focused on social media, focused on building a business digitally. And as I had that conversation with Brenda, it made me feel like I needed to shoot another series of videos where I talk a little bit about my history and documenting this entire, long arc. One of the things you can do is go through my YouTube channel and kind of start at the beginning and then find the video I did with knives in Houston to get a bigger picture of how the practice has changed and grown over time. But since we're talking about history, I wanted to go a little bit further back and talk about my experience growing up in and around Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and how I got into massage to begin with, which is how most of you know me. I was I think, difficult child in some ways. I didn't cause a lot of mischief, I don't think, from my parents. I was the oldest of three boys. I think I was in some ways the most calm and centered, but I always asked why about everything. I didn't just take things at face value. I always asked the question why, to the point where it probably annoyed adults. Why is the sky blue, that sort of thing. When I got to college, the only place that you were really allowed to continue asking those questions was in the philosophy department. So I became a philosophy student, and I spent lots of time studying the history of Western philosophy. In my free time, I was spending lots of time thinking about deeper questions, and the main focus that I had as a philosophy student was in ethics and existentialism, which is to say, what is man's place in the universe, and also how should man behave, both towards himself, his other members of his own species, and towards other species. Ethics and existentialism, with a strong focus on bioethics. So, as I was thinking deep thoughts about unemployment, as I tell people, in 1999, when I was 20 years old, I was in a car accident coming home from Jazz Fest. Friends and I had gone to Jazz Fest to see a band play, and on the way back, a drunk driver hit the car I was in. We had a horrible initial impact in the rear of the car, which is where I was, so I was closest to the vehicle that hit us. And then the car went off of the interstate into trees. So there was a double impact and collision. I had horrible contusions on my neck and on my side from the seatbelt. And then the following day when I woke up after having visited the ER, they took x-rays, they took scans and said, oh, you're fine, you didn't break anything. I never felt so sore. When I tried to get out of bed, tightening muscles to be able to lift my head was almost impossible. I think I had to turn to the side to be able to lift up. So after that accident, I gave up on school. I had been having problems to begin with because the philosophical leanings that I was going into were so far afield. I realized that we were just learning the history of Western philosophy. We weren't really in a situation where we were encouraged to think deep thoughts, and there was no financial or fiscal incentive unless you were going to teach philosophy in the university. So I dropped out of school and my health fell completely apart. I was in chronic pain. I developed a horrible case of TMJ dysfunction. And along with that TMJ dysfunction, I had just constant, excruciating pain in my head that was unrelenting. In addition, just like I was working at the post office at LSU at that time, and leaning my head forward to be able to do work in the mailroom was exceedingly difficult. I just physically couldn't deal with what was going on, so I dropped out of school, much to my parents' lament, and I wound up maybe a year or so later working at a health food store. I was still in chronic pain, and there was a young lady who was in massage school. She gave me the first massage I ever received. It was kind of like a deep Swedish on a table. And what I remember was, at the end of it, I felt nauseous. And at the same time, my muscles felt slack for the first time in years. I knew that whatever had happened during that session was good. And my only thought was, well, I'll go to massage school. Because my thought was, massage was expensive enough that I couldn't afford it. I came from a very middle class family. Massage was something, I guess, at that time in my head, people did spas. I never thought of it as a healthcare related thing. So I wound up deciding after that one massage to go to massage school. And at least if I had studied the trade, I could trade with other massage therapists. I had a friend who was originally from York, Pennsylvania. She was moving back to that area and offered me a place to stay while I was in school. We did a little bit of research, and there was the Baltimore School of Massage in York, Pennsylvania. So I signed up, moved out of state for the first time, moved to a rural area of Pennsylvania, and started my massage education. I did all the standard stuff that any massage therapist would do related to muscular and skeletal anatomy, health and hygiene, just a standard program. It was very healing to me to be able to receive body work that frequently. I learned a lot about myself and about intimacy and human touch. When I got out of school, I moved back to Louisiana and proceeded to get my license. And then over the course of the next few years, I had my first massage job at a place called the Beauty Box on Highland Road in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I worked in several different facilities over the next, say, 3 years in Baton Rouge, trying to find my way. I knew that after about a year, I had covered everything I felt I really needed. In other words, the massage had taken me so far, but I was still working on my body, and I wasn't quite where I wanted to be. So I wound up taking some yoga classes. I had kind of done some internet research, found a local yoga studio, went and took 2 or 3 yoga classes. At the end of the 3rd yoga class, I walked out of the studio and stood in the parking lot and was completely floored. I was standing in the parking lot, and the only way I can describe it was the way that you feel when you have enough alcohol to feel drunk, or you feel inebriated, or if you're drinking a lot of like cough medicine and you feel high somehow. If you take that feeling of otherness, you feel different. But instead of feeling altered, you feel clear. I've described it to people as, have you ever driven on a highway for just hundreds of miles on a long road trip and bugs splatter on the windshield? And then you stop at a gas station and clean the windshield off. And then you get back in the car and you're like, oh my God, like you can just see. That is what yoga did to me internally as far as my sense of well-being. So I began to have this sense of like this active and passive work. So it was massage and yoga. And from that standing point, I then, very shortly after, discovered Thai massage, and I'll talk about that briefly in the next video.